Okay, let's get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Very important webinar looking at supporting culturally and linguistically diverse families involved with child protection and out-of-home care services. I'm Jessica Stewart. I'm Executive Director of Family and Community Services Insights Analysis and Research Branch, also known as FACSIAR in the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that wherever we're joining today's webinar from, we're all living and working on Aboriginal land. I'd personally like to acknowledge the Bidjigal, Birrabirragal and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the owners and First Nations people of the area where I have the privilege of joining you from today. I'd like to pay my respects to all First Nations elders past and present and to future and emerging leaders. And I'd like to extend that respect to all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues joining us today. I'd also like to warmly welcome all our webinar participants that we have with us today. We've had more than 800 people registering, which is really fantastic and goes to the importance of the topic that we're talking about today. This FACSIAR Lunch and Learn webinar looks at how best to support families involved with child protection services and out-of-home care who are from culturally and linguistically diverse communities. Our presenters will present research from the Pathways of Care Longitudinal Study of children in out-of-home care, and there will also be insights shared by speakers from Western Sydney University and DCJ's Office of the Senior Practitioner. Our presenters will describe the unique challenges of being from a culturally and linguistically diverse background in terms of child protection contact and children in out-of-home care, as well as give frontline staff and policymakers information on how to best support culturally and linguistically diverse children and families who experience child protection and out-of-home care. At this time, I would like to take a moment to introduce our wonderful presenters who are joining us today. Ghassan Nujaim is the Senior Operations Manager for Settlement Services International, Multicultural Child and Family Program, and currently the Acting Head. His expertise in assessing and matching children to carers reflects his understanding of and responsiveness to the importance of children and young people having connection to their culture and heritage. Ghassan was instrumental in developing the My Life and Me Cultural Life Storybook and COVID-19 and Me, and has received a 2020 Zest Award for Outstanding Community Sector Leadership, as well as the 2021 Child Abuse Prevention Service Child Protection Award. Tony Beecham has worked extensively in the social sector, spanning policy, research, advocacy, and community development. She's currently the social policy lead at Settlement Services International and is a strong advocate for strengthening policy and practice to ensure equitable access and outcomes for culturally and linguistically diverse communities. Tony also has a strong background in research and policy in the child and family sector and particular interest in strengthening outcomes for young people transitioning from care. With more than 17 years' experience, Dr Taf Mugadza has worked in the areas of law, criminal law, child protection and social services. She has worked as a senior child protection practitioner for DCJ for at least 9 years, is currently an adjunct fellow and tutor with the Western Sydney University School of Social Sciences and runs a successful consultation organisation. Dr Mugadza provides expert advice on confronting and complex issues relating to the influence of cultural values and beliefs on child rearing and parenting. She offers strategies on engaging various African migrant communities in the child protection system. And finally, Echo Morgan, our Multicultural Services Manager. Her team sits in the Inclusive Practice Directorate in the Office of the Senior Practitioner. Some of Echo's responsibilities include the Community Services Multicultural Caseworker Program, ensuring practitioners are accessing interpreters, and encouraging relevant information to be translated into community languages. She is passionate about working with migrant and refugee children and their families and sharing this with practitioners across DCJ. What a fantastic lineup of presenters we have today. After the presentations, we will hopefully have time for a short Q&A if time permits. So please put any questions for our speakers in the chat box and I'll come to these at the end. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. And please go ahead, Kathy and Tony.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Sorry, Ghassan,
Okay.
sorry, Ghassan.
Yeah, I was on mute, sorry. Thank you everyone for joining us today. So what we're going to be presenting today is a study about the POCLS. But before that, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of SSI the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first Australians and traditional custodians of the land where we live, learn and work. We pay respect to elders past, present and future and recognize their continuous connection to country. So today we're going to be discussing, highlighting the study of POCLS, which was funded and managed by New South Wales DCJ, and it is the first large-scale prospective longitudinal study for children and young people in Australia. It is it provides a detailed information about the life course development of children who enter out-of-home care for the first time and the factors that influence their development. So the cohorts of children and young people was 44,126 children that entered out-of-home care for the first time in New South Wales between May 2010 and October 2011. Of this cohort of these children, we had 2,828 who received final care and protection orders by 30 April 2013, and these as well were eligible for the study. So the POCLS is the first study to link data on children's child protection backgrounds, out-of-home care placements, health, education, and offending held by multiple government agencies, and to match it to first-hand accounts from children, caregivers, caseworkers, and teachers. In our presentation today, the study in the study, all the children identified as CALD, Aboriginal and CALD, dual heritage, or other Australian. But in our presentation today, we will provide an overview of findings about CALD children's child protection backgrounds and experiences in out-of-home care, their developmental outcomes, relationships and connection to their family and culture, and the implication of these findings for policy and practice. Before starting with this great study, I would like to acknowledge the authors, Nafisa Asif, Judy Cashmore, Paul DeFabro, Kathy Karatasas, Tyke McMahon, Paul Mortimer, and Alan Taylor. So this slide is about highlighting the risk of significant harm of children from CALD background prior to entry into care. The study found that a greater proportion of children from a CALD background had fewer Roche reports compared to Aboriginal and other Australian children. The Roche reports involving neglect, physical and sexual abuse, they found a smaller proportion of CALD children had Roche reports involving sexual abuse and neglect. For CALD children, the predominant reason for Roche reports was physical abuse. And regarding the type of placement, the study found that a greater proportion of children from CALD background experienced foster care as a predominant type of placement during their first care period compared to Aboriginal and other Australian children. Regarding restoration, the study had found that CALD children were more likely to be restored than Aboriginal and other Australian children. We will move to physical health and developmental outcome of children. So the physical health and social emotional well-being, which is really important in this study because children's physical health was rated as good to excellent by most carers and similar by cultural background. Regarding social emotional well-being, there was some evidence that CALD children had better social emotional development compared to other Australian and Aboriginal children, where a very small proportion reported to have emotional and psychological conditions expected to last 6 months or longer. But children's social emotional well-being was associated with several factors concerning their relationships with the people they live with and their contact with their birth family, as well as their age, placement stability, and the type of placement. So the children who changed household and those in foster care had higher total social, emotional, and behavioral problems scores than children who were living in kin care or where they had not changed placement. So the overall children's social-emotional well-being in the POCLS was consistently associated with how positive carers were about children's contact with their birth parents, how well it was working, and their own self-reported parenting warmth and hostility. Regarding cultural identity and connection, we found the study found that the majority of carers of CULT children reported being confident about their ability to maintain cultural connections and language. However, carers reported that about a quarter to a third of children did not identify with their cultural background. And this might be for many reasons regarding trauma, and carers reported that many CULT children were living in out-of-home care arrangements with little exposure to their birth language and had little access to cultural or religious activities or connections to their cultural communities. Carers reported that some level of cultural identity was being maintained for most CULT children, including culturally relevant food. Regarding children's relationship with their carers, and it is really important because we have identified that a majority of children were living with kin. So there were similarities and differences between CULT and non-CULT children in their experience in out-of-home care regarding their relationship with their carers. The carers' parental warmth self-rating was similar with carers from all groups generally, reporting they display a warm style of parenting, which is even often or always. Children from all groups were similar in how close they indicated they felt to members of either their caregiver, household, or to members of the birth family. Children from all backgrounds were similar in how emotionally responsive they rated their carers as being. And being responsive, this included whether they helped them if they had a problem, listened to them, and did things with them that are just for fun, as well as whether their carers helped them to feel part of the family. Over 80% of children from all backgrounds at each wave and in both kin and foster care indicated that they were happy living there. The carers of CULT and non-CULT children did not differ in their self-reported ratings or their parenting style. So overall, carers were very positive about how close they were to the children in their care. There was a consistent trend for the carers of CULT children to be more likely to say that they were very close to the child compared with those of non-CULT children from background. So CULT children, especially those in relative and kinship care, were more likely to be living with their siblings than children of non-CULT backgrounds. This may indicate that kin carers were more likely to take a sibling group of CULT children than foster carers of non-CULT relatives. Regarding a relationship with the birth family, the study had found that children were most likely to have contact with their mother than their father and siblings, followed by other relatives. CULT children tended to be less likely to have contact with both parents than children of non-CULT backgrounds. So CULT children were also less likely to have contact with siblings they were not living with than children identified as Aboriginal CULT, and other Australian. And we all know, like from the previous slide, this may be because CULT children were more likely to be living with their siblings, so no sibling contact outside their household was needed. According to their carers, CULT and Aboriginal CULT children, dual heritage, in kinship care were more likely to have a good relationship with their mother and with the maternal aunts and uncles and cousins they were not living with. So the mother and the maternal side. Than children from Aboriginal and other Australian backgrounds. There were few differences for children in foster care. CULT carers were significantly more likely to report that CULT children had a good relationship with their birth fathers, but not with other family members, than carers of CULT children whose own background was not CULT. I will leave, like, it is a great report, and I encourage everyone to have a look at it. And I will leave it right now to my colleague, Tony, to talk about the policy and practice implication from this study.
Oops. Yes, sorry. Hi, everyone. So what are the implications for policy and practice from the findings? Firstly, the findings relating to fewer Roche reports and high percentage of CAL children restored point to the critical importance of early intervention and family preservation to reduce the number of children entering care. We need to connect family with services and supports as early as possible. For example, prenatal support and parenting programs. We'd like to see a focus on culturally sensitive community engagement initiatives to educate parents in CAL communities on stages of child development and what a child needs to thrive. And we need to ensure that early intervention and family preservation services are culturally responsive to the needs of CAL families. For example, culturally responsive training can enhance skills and competencies in working with children and families from CAL backgrounds. In New South Wales, children in care who come from a CAL background must have a cultural support plan as part of their care plan. Care plans should emphasise the importance of engagement and connections between children and their birth families. From a policy point of view, high-quality care planning requires adequate timeframes to allow for permanency planning and consultation with the child's extended family and kin. Cultural plans should set out how the child's cultural needs will be met. For example, how will they be supported to participate in cultural and religious activities? And we need to focus on strategies to engage family or kin of children to build safe connections with their family and culture. For example, culturally sensitive family group conferencing and the family finding models. In relation to establishing placements and training for carers, we need to promote placements with siblings wherever possible, and where that's not possible, we need to promote relationships with siblings the child is not living with. We need a strong focus on recruiting carers from a diverse range of CAL background, which requires strong collaboration with CAL leaders and service providers. And this will create opportunity for optimal placements for CAL children, as well as building a greater cultural diversity in the background of all carers. In regard to training and development for caseworkers, out-of-home care service providers, both in DCJ and NGOs, should recruit caseworkers from culturally diverse backgrounds. And we need to focus on strengthening practitioners' shared knowledge of cultural elements in statutory care through group supervision and reflective practice. And finally, we need to improve data collection and reporting. So we need to ensure accurate identification and documentation of CALD families, and this should be a mandatory data field in DCJ data sets so that appropriate supports can be provided. And there should be routine reporting of cultural diversity within child protection data in districts to enable service planning to address the needs of CALD communities. Thank you. So that concludes our presentation, and I'll now hand over to Taff.
Thank you, Tony and Ghassan. That was such an informative presentation. I will be talking about the experiences of African Australian parents and what they are going through when they are raising their children within the Australian environment. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that ACHE Consulting Group acknowledges traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognizes the continuing connection to lands, waters, and communities We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to the elders past and present. So I guess we know already that where there's migration, it is going to impact families, it is going to impact communities, and it's going to impact value systems and belief systems. Migration creates an environment where there is cultural diversity. And we know that people of migrant backgrounds, when they come here, they maintain their cultures, they observe their cultural practices, and this influences their identities. Despite COVID-19, Australia continues to be a very multicultural country. We continue to have people of various migrant backgrounds coming into the country. And amongst these people, we have people of African heritage. Upon settling in Australia, people of African heritage are faced with a foreign society built on a child protection system that monitors how children are cared for and raised. The questions that I will answer today are: how do sub-Saharan African migrant parenting practices fit within the Australian society, in particular within the child protection context? And how do sub-Saharan African migrant parents and caregivers negotiate cultural differences and conflict, as well as parenting expectation within the new environment? I might not be able today, due to our time, to talk about everything that I wanted you guys to know, but after the presentation, there's going to be more detailed information that's going to be published on the DCJ website. So please take time to go and read through that information. We know that there are broad child protection guidelines in place to address culture-related issues, but little is known about the extent to which the interventions in place meet the needs of African migrant children and their families. At Arcade, we work in a child protection environment that explores how African migrant parents and caregivers navigate parenting between the cultures that have shaped their lives and parenting expectations within the Australian environment. At Archaic, we endeavor to provide evidence to inform the development and implementation of culturally appropriate and early intervention strategies for professionals working with migrant families within the Australian child protection system. So pre-migration, we know that culture plays a major role in child rearing and development. When we're looking at belief systems, value systems, goals, and behaviors, people of African heritage are not the same. It's always important to highlight that. We are very distinct. We have cultural norms that are different and that are specific to a kin or an ethnic group. What we do have in common, though, is our history, our social settings before migration, our economic settings, our language, our political settings, and our institutional similarities. And these are the things that we can transfer and generalize that to some extent, this is how people of African heritage will relate in a situation. It is important when we are trying to understand African migrant communities to understand that we operate in a collectivist environment. Ghassan and Tony mentioned something along how carers would take a group, instead of just one child, because that's who we are. As Africans, we raise our children within a collectivist worldview. So it is we as compared to the I beliefs. We raise our children in a family system based on a hierarchy, as opposed to an individualistic environment where the parent-child relationships are more consultative and less hierarchical. Consequently, we know that because of these experiences, our collectivist viewpoints, at times our family values and beliefs may be at odds with mainstream parenting norms within the Australian setting. What I want to explain to practitioners today is the concept of acculturation. So many times when we're engaging people of migrant backgrounds, particularly also people of African heritage, most practitioners don't understand a concept called acculturation. Acculturation refers to a process of cultural adjustments that occur due to prolonged contact between groups of people that are culturally different. There are 4 stages of acculturation that child protection practitioners need to understand when they're engaging people of migrant backgrounds. We have the integration stage. So integration refers to those that are willing to incorporate both the heritage culture and the host culture. So those that are willing to incorporate the African beliefs and the Australian beliefs. Then we've got the assimilation orientation. We're looking at those that are willing to let go of their heritage culture whilst accepting the host culture beliefs and value systems. Then we have those that experience the separation orientation. So these are the ones that are maintaining the heritage culture whilst rejecting the host culture. And then we have the marginalization orientation. These are unable to embrace the heritage culture and they're able to embrace the host culture whilst they're settling. So as practitioners, it becomes important for you to understand which orientation is my client sitting at, because that will help you understand how to engage them and what strategies you may need to put in place to successfully engage African Australian parents. Research has found that sub-Saharan African migrants are acculturated differently because of their migration status, the age of migration, and their educational attainment. People of refugee and humanitarian entrance, you find that their experiences of acculturation varies. 38% of them integrate. 34% of them experience marginalization, 15% of them remain traditional, and only 12% of them assimilate. As compared to migrants who come as skilled migrants who have language proficiency and are highly educated, you find that skilled migrants who often favor integration and assimilation. As a practitioner, it becomes important for you to understand these orientations because they help you then understand how one client may react differently to the same situation, but yet you're still dealing with people of similar backgrounds. It is within these differences in mind that child protection practitioners should take time to understand the post-migration experiences among sub-Saharan African migrants and how parents and caregivers are negotiating cultural difference and conflicts within Australia. Sub-Saharan African parents are saying a lot to child protection practitioners. They are speaking about some of the challenges and experiences that they're going through. I have compiled detailed information that you will get after the presentation on the voices of African Australian parents and caregivers, the challenges that they're telling practitioners that when you come into our homes, this is what we are experiencing. This is how we view you. Can you please view us in this manner? So this will be posted up after the presentation. What are the implications of what the parents are telling us? Our research highlights that African migrant parents, they continue to uphold their cultural beliefs and values whilst they're raising their children within Australia. Culture is influenced by society and is responsive to the environment in which it is practiced. Migration studies have established that when the process of migration begins, change is inevitable. Right. Change is inevitable in host countries, so often traditional systems and policy frameworks are challenged. Child protection practitioners need to be aware that sub-Saharan African migrant parents are active participants within social and legal processes in host nations. So if change is inevitable, what does that mean for child protection practitioners? It means that you cannot be using the same systems where, for example, if you're using for Anglo-Australian families, you then use the same systems for migrant families. It does not work. The fact that migration is happening and Australia is being considered is actually a multicultural country means that even our way of thinking has to change. As social workers, as child protection practitioners, we ought to think in a certain way. We ought to engage our clients in a certain way. And when we are engaging people of cold backgrounds, we have to be intentional in the way we engage with them. What's next? So I've put there a quotation of what one of the parents has said about the challenges that their children are experiencing. Most parents believe that maintaining their cultural beliefs whilst making the effort to fit into the Australian society has consequences for their children. The effects are also observed when these children visit their native countries because they're not fitting in either way. So we know that as child protection practitioners, we always have to highlight the voice of the child. In highlighting the voice of the child, we always have to remember that we have to make decisions that are in the best interest of the child. Decisions that are in the best interest of the child includes what the parents are also going through, the home environment in which that child is being raised, the value systems that are happening in that house, and the dynamics within that house. As child protection practitioners, if you have the voice of the parents, then you're actually able to go out and hear what the children are saying about their situations because you have a baseline to compare that information with. What we need to understand, what are children of African heritage experiencing at the moment? Are they understood or misunderstood? How do they view their culture and what are their beliefs? Who are they and how do they identify? Do they belong? And if they do belong, where do they belong? All right. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions for us, you can contact us after this. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Echo.
Thank you, Taff. Thank you for a wonderful and deep presentation about understanding working with African families. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm coming to you from Dharawal country, and I would like to pay my respect to traditional owners past, present and emerging, and acknowledging any First Nations participants today. My team, Multicultural Services, is a small team. We have a team of 3 in the Office of Senior Practitioner, and we work to improve the responsiveness of DCJ services to our culturally and linguistically diverse children, young people, families and communities. And how we do this is we work in partnership with our DCJ Child Protection, Permanency and District Services to build their capacity to engage and work with multicultural families and communities. So what do we provide? Well, we provide practice, advice and information. We manage the cultural consultation requests and referrals to our multicultural caseworkers. We develop multicultural resources to help our caseworkers understand working with CALD families. We facilitate community engagement, such as community information sessions about child protection to CALD communities. We also provide advice and consultation to our DCJ colleagues. And how do we do that? Like informing policy and program design, implementation and review. There's also we support system improvements and build sector cultural capability. Also, we provide qualitative and quantitative data. improve and target our work with our multicultural communities. We provide accountability to our DCJ strategic plans and framework. In particular, we as an agency have a DCJ multicultural plan, and we need to report that, what we're doing every year to Multicultural New South Wales. So I wanted to give you a practice example, the event that we held on Harmony Day in March this year. And so I've been speaking to today with my topic of engaging respectfully with cowed children, young people and their families. There's no better way to illustrate this than to share with you the voices and views of young people. So we were delighted to be joined with two of our DCJ youth consultants, and the two young people have had experience in the out-of-home care system. And so we asked them to share their experiences of being in care as a cold young person. So these two young people, they were very authentic and they articulated their voices to us within DCJ. One is Alice and the other one is OOHC. And it was so important for them to share the importance of culture in their lives, and also speak to, you know, the message about speaking directly about respectful engagement. So Alice is a Chinese young person. She reminded us about the impact of stereotyping culture and young people, and the assumption that come with that. She felt stereotyping happened more than we think, where people thought they knew about her culture and therefore they knew about her. However, Alice didn't want to conform to a stereotypical identity as a Chinese, model minority young person. She felt this stereotyping actually pushed her away from connecting her with her culture. Her message was to bring engagement. You know, how do you build engagement? And it was really simple, was to ask a person about their culture and don't assume it. The other one is about is OOHC. So OOHC is from his cultural background is Moroccan Lebanese, and he reinforced the need to ask a person about their culture, like adding that, you know, truly to connect with young people and their families. We need to actually sit, talk and listen about their culture and what it means to them at a particular time in their lives, and if we want to engage. These powerful reminders are respectful engagement that demonstrate the unique and individual voices of young people. And these messages are also reflected in our DCJ practice framework standards. I just wanted to go into that because how does it build on within the work that we do within the Office of Senior Practitioner and within DCJ. So the framework capability was for practitioners is to, you know, working with family and culture. And then we have some standards, and one of the standard, which is standard 3, is culturally safe practice with diverse communities. And that the words that define this standard were developed with our colleagues in the OSP with young people in out-of-home care with Settlement Services International. And that's we have Gassan and Tony with us on the panel. And I'd like to share what the young people, you know, said, and it's been taken up about, you know, the statement in the standard, and it says, "I need you to learn from and respect my culture, the language spoken by me and my family. Remember that culture is a part of me. You know, give me the change to guide you on what my culture means to me and how I want to experience it in my life." This standard outlines the behaviours expected by our practitioners to value genuinely the diversity of cultural and linguistically diverse families. The standard requires us to respect a family's worldview and cultural practices. And that includes like the cultural values, religious beliefs, child rearing practices, cultural protocols, and cultural strengths. And that's was brought to our attention by Dr. Taff and also by Gaston and Tony. Going back to Weiss, he identified that there can be gaps between our theory and practice. For example, he said that he loved our culture support plans. That we've got a mechanism to capture that for children, young people, but added that they may mean nothing if we don't within our organisation implement them after consulting the young person. So for our young people, respectful engagement is 3 straightforward steps: ask, learn, and act. I wanted to sort of just give you a bit of a background about the multicultural caseworker program that sits within my responsibility, and it's to support caseworkers within DCJ engage respectfully with families from diverse CALD communities. Our team coordinates a long established program. This program has about 70 multicultural caseworker roles in teams across the state. Our multicultural caseworkers provide culturally sensitive casework with their target community and cultural consultations to their practitioners, their colleagues. Target communities are identified based on population demographics, for instance, including migrant and refugee communities, and communities who DCJ practitioners are working in their local areas. Our program, it's flexible to change the target communities as community needs changes. As you know, like sometimes the communities may move from one location, and you slowly see it over time, they move to another location. So we need to be sort of, aware of that to make sure that we are being responsive to, the local needs. Currently on our list, we've got around about multicultural caseworkers from 32 unique cultural backgrounds, speaking 25 languages. Their role providing cultural consultations is crucial to supporting all practitioners engaged respectfully with multicultural families. I'd like to share with you this video featuring our multicultural caseworkers, sharing their insights and practice on engaging with family to keep children safe. Thank you. Just to summarise, in terms of the work that we do for the past 2 years, multicultural services, we've received around about 450 requests for cultural consultations annually from practitioners, and referred to these to appropriate multicultural caseworkers. Increasingly, we are seeing requests for pre-assessment consults with caseworkers seeking cultural knowledge prior to meeting with a family to support their engagement. Our team, we've developed some resources to help our caseworkers, like curious questions for a multicultural consultation. For example, how might I talk to this family about mental health concerns? Then there's also about cultural support plan. Sorry, the curious questions, but cultural support plans are mandatory when you're working with a child or young person. So, questions to ask family and children, for example, asking a child what they would like to learn about their culture to build strong connections, or asking a parent about the role of grandparents passing on family stories. We've also just recently developed some multicultural snapshots to help practitioners' knowledge of diverse cultures in a child protection context. To give you an example, a snapshot of the Democratic Republic of Congo, provides information to support engagement with this newly arrived refugee community around understanding child protection. We also partner within the Office of Senior Practitioner. We have a practice learning team or unit who they're providing input into culture. We provide input into cultural capability modules in the casework development program. So new caseworkers that come and join the organisation, they will be exposed to that. And also the Change Together learning program for our NGOs. To conclude, with a personal reflection on improvements in DCJ work, our latest piece of work we're supporting is contributing to a review of our structured decision making or our assessment tools to ensure suitability for engaging with multicultural families. And just a quick quote from our senior practitioner, Kate, when she said to me, "This is the opportunity, Echo, it's a bit of like that once in a lifetime to change the way we assess our POCLS or multicultural children. You've got to get on board." So I'll just end there and I'll hand it back to Jess. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agasan, Tony Taffin, Echo, for sharing your knowledge and really providing really interesting findings on the experiences of children and families and carers, particularly in the context of culture and acculturation, and for letting us hear some of the voices of young people as well. So thank you again for the presentations. We do have 10 minutes for questions, and thank you to those who have put questions in the chat. So I might start with the first two that are interrelated, and that is around what role do birth families play in the case management and also in cultural planning, and is this a mandatory requirement?
I can answer, probably Ghassan. Do you want to answer first, Ghassan?
You are on mute, Ghassan.
Maybe I can just start off, Jess, and then Ghassan can join.
Thank you, Echo.
Birth families play a very important, pivotal role in relation to a cultural support plan, or even just in terms of just consultations. We need to ask those questions about, what is important to them, and how do we, our practitioners, follow through or try and make that happen. The other question is about cultural support plan. Cultural support plans are mandatory for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, and as well as for our CALD and multicultural children. And just acknowledging, I do jump from saying CALD and multicultural. And I'm sorry I put it into one basket, but saying CALD the long term, I'm just cutting it short, and I hope everybody understands what I'm saying.
Can you hear me now, Jess? Jess, can you hear me?
Jess, you're on mute.
Go ahead, Ghassan.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So thanks, Echo, for this. To follow up on Echo's comments, the family plays a vital role in the life of the child. Sometimes we can be like we are parents, and a child moved from the parents because of many issues does not mean that the parents are not parents anymore. So like this role, they need to continue playing a vital role in the life of the child, and it can be in a structured way because they have a chaotic life. So the caseworker will help them to be in a structured way in the life of the child. So it can be in many ways. One, it can be through consultation with them, giving them an update through section 149, 163, giving them like the opportunity to be a vital role in the case plan, in the cultural support plan, to discuss with them how they are living their culture, what happened, how the child was living the culture before being removed, and all these sort of things. And in the cultural support plan, it is real, and as well, how like the vital role they're going to be playing in the family contact or in the family time between them and their children, and how they can transfer this cultural heritage to their children through family time. So this is one part of it. The other part of it, it is really important in the cultural support plan. We all know that cultural matching is really important, but sometimes we need placements, and or placement matching does occur because a carer does not like the child has additional needs and they need to be living with a carer. So it is really important to, in the cultural support plan, the question raised, how are we going to be empowering the carer to apply this cultural support plan? Because we saw a lot of cultural support plans, just like plans, just very nice plans, but they cannot be achieved on what's going to be like, how are we going to be having the voice of the child? How are we going to empower the community to play a major role in the life of the child and the carer? Because like in some communities we have, if the child is not with them, the child is dead, and or they will ostracize the carer even if the carer is from their cultural background. So how do we engage in all this? And with this, the parents will have a major role in with engaging them.
Thank you. And there's another question just to clarify whether the same requirements are for NGO managed out-of-home care placements as well as DCJ.
Absolutely. So this is like, as we all know, NGOs are subcontracted by DCJ, and we all operate under the standards of child protection put by the Office of the Children Guardian. So, and as well, we all know that the NGOs have very strong practices regarding this, similar to similar to DCJ.
And can I also comment briefly on cultural care plans? Because I think what I often find within the child protection setting is sometimes child protection practitioners that get so inundated with work. At Arcade, we've actually worked with DCJ and other NGO practitioners where we've gone out, we've done cultural care plans on behalf of DCJ or NGOs, where it's actually filed before the Children's Court. So when we're working with African families, for example, we already know who needs to be consulted and participate in the cultural care plan, because sometimes practitioners are not going to have time to do that. And an additional service that we offer is we actually assist DCJ and NGOs to implement the cultural care plan, because sometimes there's not always anybody who follows through in the implementation.
Correct.
So it's the implementation that's the problem. Things are being done, but sometimes they're not implemented.
Thank you, Taff. There's another question here. What are some of the key factors leading to out-of-home care for culturally and linguistically diverse families? And are there specific prevention interventions?
I can answer just quickly and then pass it on to Ghassan and Hilda, Jess. What we do is we do community information sessions to the community. So if it comes from, like, for example, like a migrant resource centre, say, for instance, like Sid West or CORE, or, you know, all from an ethno-specific group or a volunteer group, we actually engage with the local CSC from that area and inform them, and they will assign a caseworker to go out and do that information session with an interpreter. Or sometimes there isn't a need, but it is about informing them about our you know, the child protection laws, isn't it, Ghassan? You know, because some of the communities don't know that, you know, it is against the law to hurt a child, or, you know, we see it as, you know, neglect or leaving the child alone with younger siblings looking after them. But culturally, it is what, you know, in their home country, that's what they do. And we may call it physical abuse in Australia, but in their home country, it's seen as just, you know, teaching them to behave and, you know, respect their elders. So we go out there and inform them about this, and then tell them about our law and what, you know, you can't do these things. And there, that's part of like the education. Handing it over to Taff and Ghassan.
Thank you, Echo. It's similar. So we're at SSI, we have community awareness. We call it, like, other than community engagement, community awareness, where we highlight the child protection issues. And with us, we always operate from what's our bottom line, what's non-negotiable, and then to build from it. And we always highlight with the caseworkers, because it's really important for caseworkers to understand if these behaviors are like are cultural behaviors, are they personal behaviors, or are they just like global behavior? So with this, it would help because we do not want to go through cultural biases, one, or two, to be always putting everything on culture. And when we're doing our risk assessment, we are placing a child at risk. So it's really important to differentiate this, and we highlight it as well with communities and what it means for them. So the bottom line is really important. Communities would know that this is the non-negotiable, and then how we can build and regarding other issues.
Thank you. And I know we're at time, but there is Taff, what is one thing that you would like caseworkers working with African families to focus on when they leave this session?
Thank you for that question. I think just realizing that, I think one message that I hear from African parents is, we've been doing this before we come here, and we've been doing it right. Listen to us, don't judge us, get in our shoes and work with us. I think that's the biggest lesson I want caseworkers to take. Put yourself in the shoes of African parents. Imagine if you're the one who had gone to another country and you're trying to settle, and you'd lived all your 32 years or your 40 years living a certain way, only to get to a country and be told 1 year later what you're doing is not right. You will be resistant. But when we understand that people have been doing things the way they've been doing them and it has worked for them, let's work from a strength-based perspective and navigate what they know and how we can implement that so that it works within the child protection or the Australian setting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's fantastic advice. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. If you did register for today, you'll receive a link and you're able to view and share the recording of today's webinar. And we'll also be providing some additional links and materials from our presenters related to the webinar. And also, please be aware of our May FACSIAR Lunch and Learn, which is on the 23rd of May, which will be about family time and supporting positive and lasting connections for children in care. So registrations for that one are also open, and we will be putting the link in the chat. So thank you again all so much for today. It's been a wonderful series of presentations and a great discussion, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.